Join us on Gender Perspectives, showing every Saturday by 4 p.m. Repeat every Wednesdays by 5 p.m. and Thursdays by 3 p.m. Change begins with perspective. Let's widen yours.
On the Hub, your ultimate show on e-vibes. From trending stories and social media drama to top charting music, must-watch movies for unmissable conversations with your favorite entertainment personalities, plus fun segments every week.
I should try harder, so...
Okay, I don't know that one.
Outfit of the day.
Oh, I don't do that. That's some Gen Z stuff.
Oh, now you say it's a Gen Z stuff.
It's everything you love about entertainment, served fresh every week at 1 p.m. with weekend repeats just in case you missed it. The Hubs on e-vibes, where the vibes never stop. Only on Signaturetv.
New every morning on Signaturetv, we open the day for you with needed energy, information, and required vibes to shape your day. From sizzling snippets of stories in various areas of life to intriguing conversations with net worth guests.
When you have people who have no track record becoming your leaders, you have a problem.
There's no outstanding gratuity when Obi took over from me. I left in all the accounts of Anambra State 13.8 billion for him.
Your day cannot be complete without Signature Morning on weekdays and Signature New Day on weekends. There is no better way to start your day except Signature Morning and Signature New Day every day on Signaturetv. We are local.
International communities observing
When the main market is in chaos, people
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye. Aye. We have taken it through by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signaturetv, news in your pocket.
get plugged into the heartbeat of entertainment on the Hub, your ultimate show on e-vibes. Stories and social media drama.
Stories, science, and solutions.
The complications of cancer management or treatment is they have some of them at one point in time you see them having anemia. Okay, so you see them at times being transfused. But at the same time, you come in with the diet.
Nutrition, mental health, innovations in medicine, fitness, and everyday wellness. Whether you're managing a condition, staying informed, or just living your best life, Inside Health is your trusted guide.
I'm Tigiti Agorum, and I'll be with you. I'm Tigiti Agorum, and I'll be with you every week on Inside Health, only on Signaturetv.
Bright and early, as the day breaks, as the newspaper headlines trail the stories that shape the day, we at Signaturetv trail the headlines that trail the day. We interrogate the headlines that trail the day. We interrogate the headlines. We analyze the stories that make the headlines.
WAEC is overrated, and they even overrated themselves. And when you go CBT, they are insensitive of some Nigerian children who have never had what they call CBT.
With passion and emotion, we drive the conversation to change the narrative.
Let nobody be deceived by Nigerian high-level performing in agriculture export. we are still where we are.
Newspaper review on Signature TV every morning on Signature Morning, Week View on Signature TV every morning on Signature Morning, weekdays, and Signature New Days, and Signature New Day, weekends. Newspaper review on Signature TV. We do not just review the headlines, we make the headlines relevant to our daily lives.
The way we see the world shapes the way we change it. Gender isn't just a checkbox, it's a lens. One that helps us understand the world more deeply, aims to challenge assumptions, ignite conversations, and build inclusive solutions across every sector of society.
We are not, fighting the men. We are not, fighting the men. We are not saying we are equal in terms of rights. We're only asking they should recognize our existence.
Join us on Gender Perspectives, showing every Saturday by 4 p.m. Repeat every Wednesdays by 5 p.m. and Thursdays by 3 p.m. Change begins with perspective. Let's widen yours.
We are local.
International communities observing
Just finish the Why they make markets easy?
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye. Aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israel.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Thank you so much for staying with us. You're still tuned in to Signature Morning. Now, in many societies, of course, older persons, while acknowledged, are rarely integrated when it comes to development. Plans. And so this morning, we're looking at how to build sustainable systems for older persons' inclusion in development agendas, particularly shifting from tokenism and politics of welfare. We're joined via Zoom this morning by Dr. Omokaro. She is an aging policy and development expert here to shed more light on this conversation. Now, when we talk about this idea of older persons' inclusion, what exactly, does that mean, particularly looking at development as well? What does that mean, and what does true inclusion mean for the older person?
Of course, when you talk about inclusion, we come from the standpoint of human and then social development. And when you're talking about human rights, you're basically saying, as the Constitution guarantees, that every citizen of a country, every citizen of a state has the right to be included in the process of economic development and in the benefits that come from economic development. And then when you talk about social development, you are talking about well-being, whether it be economic, social, health, that every citizen of that country has a right to access, to be able to access social care, access health and all that. So inclusion only starts from the standpoint of being able, first and foremost, to articulate a development agenda. And when we talk about a development agenda, we are talking about a roadmap of goals and priorities meant to boost a country's economic or social growth, or even a state. And so in that development agenda, you're looking at frameworks, as I said, priorities, you're setting objectives, you're developing a plan, and that plan has to be inclusive of everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of disability, regardless of age. And so true inclusion means that at the onset of your setting out your development agenda, You have thought far and wide and looked at the issues, as you're trying to forge this impact, the issues, the comprehensive issues, and then how it will affect every other person. You may not necessarily have thought about each individual in the global or the regional or the national agenda as you have set it. But now, when you now come down to breaking down the agenda into the particular pillars, you will make sure that each sector or each ministry or each agency that needs to translate these agendas to, bring in and provide access for the constituents that they provide for, according to their statutory mandate, will now have a policy, and that policy will be able to articulate their peculiar challenges. And so when you talk about inclusion, you start from the standpoint of the law, first and foremost. Does the law make provision that these people are included? Is there a compelling law that must enforce the inclusion of these people? Do you have the authorizing agencies to ensure that they ensure the inclusion of these people? And then the policy articulation. And then you now come down to your strategies. What strategies are you going to put in place to ensure that these things are articulated and these things can be implemented? And then you come down to find these people. And then, of course, the kinds of programs that are older persons included. Are older persons included? Mechanisms. Do they really realize that older persons have, these peculiar, challenges? Older persons, 70% live in the rural areas. Older persons have other, situational, issues, transportation issues, really poverty issues, transportation issues, really poverty issues. If the strategies and the mechanisms of engagement, the programs that are developed does not address these peculiarities, then we can really not safely say that we have built sustainable systems, to include older persons in development.
Right. Now, you've mentioned quite a number of things that should be factored in when building an inclusive space for older people. But what are the gaps that you have identified so far, or what are the factors that you would say are hindering this inclusion with older people?
First and foremost, the genuine interest of a leader, of an executive governor, because I'm really truly focused on the subnationals, because it will seem that every focus is on the federal. So when you look at Nigeria, we have 36 states and the federal capital territories. So what are they doing? And so the first thing I'm going to look at is going to be political commitment in their own state agendas, because it will seem, apart from the Renewed Hope agenda, every state, have also titled their own agenda. Older persons really, central also as other population group. And so you look at that, so you find gaps in political commitment. Some do not even understand that older persons are right holders. And so what you find is tokenism, like we mentioned, which is just a practice of, making symbolic efforts, just to just create that appearance. Once in a while, we remember older persons. We plan some palliatives distributions we give to older persons. So there's a gap in political commitment. There's a gap in data. The impairments, the degree of impairments. Some are not in need of that kind of severe long-term care, and so needs assessment. So there's a gap in data, as I said, and then there's also gap in engagement mechanisms. How do you engage older persons? Sometimes some states or federal engage older persons just when they have palliatives, they call them out and then give them these tokens, and then after that they are gone. So there's no sustainable system where you have this engagement. And then there's gap in law. And in fact, maybe I should have mentioned that one first, because it's the National Senior Citizen Center Act, which has set up a National Senior Citizen Center, a federal agency. And so it behoves on the state government, as prescribed in this National Senior Citizen Center Act, for them, to domesticate this act. Because when you have an act, a state act, compelling you do to set up a kind of focal agency or a focal, maybe department, if you don't want to call it an agency, that really, makes a frontal focal focus on older persons are intersecting and complex. So there's gap in, political commitment. I see gap in legislation across the states. Only about 8 states, I think, have domesticated that act. So as long as there's no legislative foundation, there's no act, there's no compelling, coordination of issues of older persons, then you still have that tokenism in inclusion of older persons. Then policy gaps. Most states do not have state policies on aging. And until you articulate the challenges of older persons into a better future, as long as you see legislation, you see policy, you see operationalizing of this policy, and then you see partnerships and engagement mechanisms. How do you reach them? And because aging is very complex and very intersecting, how do you get the different professions? How do you get the different NGOs working in different areas? Very helpful. Articulate all the different sectors, articulate all the different sectors that must come in, and then build that sustainable framework. And then another gap that I see is human resource capacity. People assume they know aging. Aging is very complex. And aging is a specialty area. For instance, the agency that was set up is a specialty agency. And I really had to fight for that, for people to get to that understanding that it's a specialty agency. It deals with older persons, that really need special care. It deals with older persons whose education is a continuing education. It's not any kind of general education. Some of them may, continue to go to get the general education. But the time comes when where you're focusing on is providing that lifelong learning opportunities, which may not necessarily be formal. And, so you have gaps in human resources. Who really understands? Who among the administrators really understand, the intricacy of the policies of aging? So we need to build capacity in building, these capacities. So there is that, huge gap in human capacity. Persons who really understand these issues. There's also that huge gap in making other institutions understand that aging is not only a government affair. Aging is a faith-based organization affair. The churches, they have older persons that have worshipped since their youth, and they are still there. So the best that they can without upskilling. Nigeria has to come to that place where aging, becomes an industry as it is in developing countries. Aging is an industry, it's an economy, and to that place where, we think about care as a commission, and then we can begin to fill these gaps. But before we get there, each state, executive governor, the state assemblies, it behoves of them to look at older persons, as, the lens on the youth, an optimistic lens on older persons, so that these people can continue to engage, and so on and so forth.
Yes. Now, Dr. Mokar, you mentioned tokenism, and you also mentioned politics of welfare. So I would like us to, talk more about that. When you say tokenism and politics of welfare, what are the dynamics of that? How does that affect older people? How does it present itself when, in society, when dealing with older people? The idea of tokenism and politics of welfare.
Yes. Firstly, we must admit that we have what is called ageism, meaning, the stereotypes, the negative stereotypes we have about older people. And then, of course, the prejudices, our attitudes towards older persons. And these attitudes that now inform our behaviors, which is how we discover that once you're old, you really have nothing to contribute to society, which is false. Once you're old, you become a burden to the economy, you become a cost and no more investment. So investing in you is, is really a loss to the economy. They don't see older persons really who have retired, that they can't still have institutional memories and expertise and those skills to contribute. And so when they now come to investing in older persons, investment is not as a matter of linking aging to development. Linking aging and investment in older person, whether it be in their healthy aging, whether it be in long-term care, as though these investments will yield dividend for economic growth. That is what we fail to see. So because they do not also want to be seen who has a mandate on, I just give an example, on women. I'm talking hypothetically now. I'm talking hypothetically now, but it really is happening. And you get to a ministry, an agency that has to do with primary healthcare, and then you look at the programs. You don't really see sustainable program. You don't really see a strategy that includes older persons, and where it includes older persons, you don't see where this thing is broken, operationalized into programs, and you don't see funding for these things. And so what they now do is what I call is tokenism. I call it politics of welfare, welfareism. Why? Because you don't want to be accused that, oh, you have overlooked older persons, you're marginalizing older persons. So you just grab something here and there and you slap. Maybe one day, oh, we celebrate International Day of Older Persons. And you go, we celebrate, we buy wrappers, we buy food, and that's the end of it. Or maybe, they are giving out, they are giving out resources, cash transfers, and you really look at the whole social investment program. You don't see one program dedicated, which means that they have taken time, thought through it, articulated that there are some older people who don't have the means. They don't have family. There are some older persons who really need long-term care and they cannot afford it. There are older persons who need care at home when they are aging in place. Realization of all the programs for other population, category. So I look at it as tokenism. So whatever they are doing doesn't really, cannot be scaled because that framework and that system is not available because it has not been thought through. The partnerships and the systems has not been thought through. I've been sure there's no funding because they'll tell you there's no funding. So what else can we call that? So what I call tokenism is really, as I said before, the failure to build sustainable systems and something is being done, whereas it doesn't translate to sustainable action. It cannot be scaled. You can so a sustainable system that is real committed to meeting the needs of older person has to start from scratch. It must start from that policy, develop a plan of action, build a strategic roadmap, develop the engagement systems, and ensure that you pilot tested them to show that it's scalable. So for instance, so that is why you have the laws. That's why you have the policy. But you can go with the cultural context of a Kwai state and you tweak it to meet. As far as I want to meet older person, or I can just do medical outreach without really, looking through to see how do I enlarge this medical outreach? How do I sustain a relationship with the primary healthcare development agency? How do I sustain relationship with the tertiary care wherever they are so that they can be the ones who now help me to do this needs assessment? How do I bring in NBS? How do I bring in health workers? How do I ensure that the infrastructure of the primary healthcare is age-friendly? These are systems that you build, and then somebody looks at you and say, okay, now this has been thought through, this is sustainable, this framework has fitted in all the partners. And so that is what sometimes we use the older persons to play politics. We use these things and it becomes politics. So for instance, somebody in the House of Assembly, I mean, this is hypothetical really, somebody in the House of Assembly, somebody in the Senate who had all this while, has had constituency projects and is building all manners of things for all that population category, has not thought about the older persons in that constituency. Can I build a senior center? Can I, engage in housing? Because I built the system that even if I leave office, another person who wins the election, and then they are looking for older people, they are calling them out, and they are having medical outreaches, they are giving out what they are giving out. And after the election, that ceases. And the older persons are back to who they were, ignored and marginalized in these rural communities. And so that's what I call the politics of welfareism, because it becomes politics where you don't have sustainable systems with interlinked policy strategies, reinforcing, intersecting programs, operations, and practices, then you cannot scale it. You cannot scale it. So what you're just doing, one good day you come out, oh, I remember older persons today. Another good day, another bad day, you say, well, I really don't want to waste money. I just want to spend this money on the youths. So that's what I really mean by that.
All right. Now, from what you've said, older people frequently portrayed as dependents, instead of contributors. So, to explain to people the importance of reframing that idea, older persons as of these tokenism and welfareism. How do you do that, and how important is it for people to be aware of these things?
Yes, first and foremost, I want to ask for an act to establish the National Senior Citizen Center. And recently also, there was a public hearing on another bill, which will allow older persons to, access some privileges by rights. And so the federal government really has shown that older persons are bona fide citizens and older persons are contributors. And if you read really the National Senior Citizen Center Act, that piece of legislation, it talks about
time. I mean, this is a conversation that to putting our older people and including them in development plans. It's a pleasure speaking with you this morning. We hope to have you some other time to continue this. Speaking with you this morning. We hope to have you some other time to continue this conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and for being a part of this conversation, remember to follow social media platforms to be up to date with all the programs and all the content that we have in store for you. Now don't go anywhere as Signature Morning continues right after now. I am systems has always remained inconsistent and publicly proposed, as a sustainable pathway to handling these issues. So this morning we're looking at PPP as panacea for sustainable water supply and sanitation services in Nigeria with Mark Adeyemi Adedayo, who is a certified. Thank you for joining us on Signature Morning. Why has access to safe water and sanitation remained a persistent challenge in Nigeria?
People getting water from the bowl and all that. But when we're talking about public water supply, piped water, it's a big problem. Several studies from UNICEF and co says that Nigeria is doing about 7%, even as low as 4%, thereabouts. So, and the major challenges are, number one, our assets are broken down and there have not been investments in a long time. There have been inefficiency in the system. In the urban area where the utilities are supposed to cover their costs, they can't. So at the end of the day, the plants run down in many of their energy bills, and they were discovered. They couldn't meet their operational and maintenance costs. So eventually those plants stopped working, and at some point they become vandalized. In some other clients, and they are never fixed back. So that systemic, that accumulated into total breakdown of water facilities, and we are getting to the point where it's almost becoming elusive pipe water from taps. So investment is low. A lot of governments don't even put money in capital projects for water, and then even the operators too, they are not operating efficiently to make sure that those systems are sustainable. So basically, those are.
Looking at the situation of things on ground, can PP?
Of course, it can, because where we are now, we have serious investment gap. So I told you those plants are degraded. A lot of them are vandalized. Pipes have been uprooted. So if we're looking at low scale, we're talking about $6 billion. But if we are talking about universal supply, we're talking about between 20 and 30 billion US dollars. And then yearly, we need between 500 million to $2 billion for operations and maintenance. Government can't muster that type of money anymore. So we need a private sector fund to come into it. And then, of course, secondly, too, we were talking about the impetus to make sure that the system runs and it runs efficiently. The public sector lack that motivation. But the private sector person, when he puts his money, he recoup his money back. So that is an impetus for him to make sure that he keeps supplying.